There's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game. Gonna crack down and shut down, it's sundown. I said it's all just a game.
We are on air. What is up, Calgary? This is the Just a Game podcast with Rob Kerr for the third time in about a week and a half. I am not Rob Kerr. I am Danny Austin. I am normally a sports writer for Post Media covering the Flames and Stampeders. But yeah, really happy to be here again. It's a Friday. It's a beautiful Friday here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I know my co-host, who I'm going to introduce in just a second, was also at McMahon Stadium with me this morning watching Stampeders practice. We've had a sort of crazy week here with Calgary sports. But allow me to introduce my esteemed colleague, my close friend. Had a couple beers with you watching some hockey on Wednesday night at your place, and I appreciated that very much.
We also watched the sunset on my balcony. It was good. It was a well-rounded.
It was cute.
You know?
It was cute, and we are cute. You are Salim Valji from TSN.
Number one Calgary sports media bro couple, I think.
So. Ooh, wow. I mean, I think you and Julian have me beat.
Julian's got a couple. He's got like Aaron Vickers. There's like Pat Steinberg wiggling in there.
Yeah.
Cammie's a bro.
Cammie's always a bro. No question. Yeah, are we then? I mean, we're in the mix.
We are. There's a power rankings. The fans can vote. But
if you're at St. James Corner on first,
it's basically our office.
Basically our office.
And Ship and Anchor too, for being honest.
And your balcony.
Yeah.
We had a delightful Wednesday evening. We were both. We're gonna have to talk with Matthew Kachuk at some point.
Oh, for sure.
In this first hour that we have you here. But so just blew our minds that he scored with 4 seconds left in that game. But yeah, we had a great time. It's honestly super fun. You were on last Wednesday, which was a little bit more, let's be honest, a little bit more focused, because I think we knew we knew that. I think everyone knew, I'd say 90% that the announcement was coming on Tuesday. There was still a little bit up in the air whether it would be Conroy. I think a lot of us suspected it.
Yeah.
But because of the lengthy interview process, you began to wonder. But we were much more sort of like dialed in, got to be checking our phones, all of that.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I woke up this morning and like, this is not because I had to do sort of Conroy stuff throughout the week, follow-up stuff. This morning, I had to go to Stampeders practice. I woke up. It was a little cool. This was the first time it's felt like summer since the end of the season. Like this weekend feels like I can have a couple drinks. I can go to a patio. I don't have to be waking up at 7 just to see if
it'll be fleeting, because we know a new coach is going to get announced within probably 3 weeks at the absolute max. But and I imagine there might be a little bit of, is Iginla going to join, or is there a release coming out? But you're right, man. Like I played golf for the first time yesterday, and I checked my phone like once in the 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Like it was awesome. It was such a relief. And like these jobs are fun, but you do devote an awful lot of your life to them. And the number of times that we've been at the Dome at 11 p.m. or like we have plans and they're kind of broken by breaking news. Like there is something you have to give up to have these types of
I always feel like the job is not actually all that hard, but you're kind of like on call a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
So like that's more the exhausting part. And this weekend, I mean, there's the Stampeders red and white game, which I think I'm going to.
We both have sisters who are doctors who are on call for a little bit more.
That's the thing. It's so embarrassing. Like my older sister is an emergency room doctor, and for me to at all complain about my job, it's like I watch sports and write down what happened. It's not that. It's like it's not that consequential.
You are on call though, so
it's true. I am on call, but it's nice, and I think that like the Conroy thing has just brought it's not brought focus, like that's the wrong term, but I do think we now know he gave us a really insightful,
For sure, yeah.
some insights into the direction that the franchise is going, what they're looking at this summer.
Yeah.
So rather than us sitting here and being like, well, are you gonna trade Elias Lindholm if you won't resign? We basically know that he's gonna try to talk Lindholm into being back. But so it's, I think that all of us have a better idea of the direction of the team, which just makes our jobs easier, makes this podcast easier.
Yeah, for sure.
To be honest. And now, as you said, I mean, I think it's gonna be a couple weeks before our head coach is announced.
Yeah.
But I mean, and we'll talk about that obviously, but there is, I think that the Conroy thing, it wasn't just the first ball that had to drop. It was the big thing that nothing else could happen until that happened.
Yeah.
So now there's a path. For
sure. Yeah. And I mean, maybe hopefully, like, Craig is such a personable man. Like, even when you run into him in the elevator, like I hope that he retains that openness. I imagine he'll be a little bit more judicious with his words in the coming press conferences, but it was honestly so insightful. If I'm a Flames season ticket holder, or I'm someone that's invested as a fan, I would have been really happy with that press conference, because you were given a really clear direction. This time last year, Danny, we were all wondering about Gaudreau and will he or won't he? And I think the world of Brad Treliving. I think we have different views on his tenure as a GM, but he is like a really good guy. And
but I also think he's a really good guy.
Yeah,
and I don't necessarily think he was a bad GM. I just think it's a mixed bag.
For sure.
And I'm from Toronto, so I'm sorry to interrupt. I really apologize. I will let you get back to it. But like, I've had more texts and calls from like my high school buddies back home about like, hey, tell me about Brad Treliving over the last 48 hours. So like, and they're all very much like, wait a minute, this is the guy who traded Tkachuk. This is the guy who traded Dougie Hamilton. This is the guy who let Johnny Gaudreau walk for free. And I'm sort of saying, well, guys, like, there's context that's required in each of those moves. But like, no, you're right that you look at it in isolation. There's a bunch of moves where you sort of wonder. But I think Brad's a great guy, and I don't think we both do. I think everyone does. He treated media and apparently was a phenomenal boss to Flames staffers. But I didn't see that type of transparency with him, and I think you need that with your fan base now, especially given the image tarnishing that kind of took place this past season with. They didn't play all that well. Daryl didn't perhaps provide the spokespersonship that you would hope for the face of a franchise. So the fact that Conroy, number one, it's someone that connects really well with the fans. He always did as a player. And the fact that he kind of told us his plans. He's going to have more youth, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, I'm sure. But also, like, they're not going into this season with 7 guys that could 100%. Walk. Like that's guaranteed. Pickle Rec just said in the comments, treated a good job on some things, but his asset management was garbage. No, I don't know that I'm going to go so far as saying garbage, but like that was something that for sure we heard from Craig was asset management. Those guys aren't walking for free. No, they're not. They're not. Like, so like it's almost like there's not even a debate anymore. It's just like, if Chris Tanev doesn't want to sign, I have to assume he's getting traded. If Noah Hannafin doesn't want to sign, I have to assume he's getting traded. And Conroy talked sort of at length about what he learned from the Johnny Gaudreau situation. Yeah. And he was so confident Gaudreau was going to resign, but confidence isn't the point. You need the signature on the page. And until you have that, you don't have the player. So, he had to learn from that, and taking guys' reassurances that, oh yeah, they want to be here and all of that doesn't do you any good when you lose them for nothing. So yeah, I think that the asset management piece is the main part of Treliving's legacy that we're going to look back on for sure and wonder, even with Tkachuk, like, and this is not a knock on Huberdeau or Uyghur or Cole Schwinn, all of whom I have a lot of time for, but like, look, if they don't win a cup in the next 3 to 4 years, which I don't know how much any of us believe is super possible, then they would have objectively been better off with draft picks and young players. For sure. And even diving into that Tkachuk or with Matthew Tkachuk. Situation more. If for whatever reason he wasn't comfortable over here, or he had challenges with certain ways the organization functioned that you can tangibly change, did you do a good enough job of addressing it? Did you miss? And like, that's where Danny's convincing has me. Like, Danny's done a good job of convincing me in that regard. Like, well, go into it. It's exactly like, look, it is possible that Matthew Tkachuk just always wanted to play in the States. Yeah. And he was going to, he wasn't going to raise too much of a fuss. He was going to, but once he hit free agency and was a UFA, it is possible that there's absolutely nothing that could have been done. He's an American guy. Yeah. St. Louis isn't the South, but it's, I don't know, is it the South? I don't know what defines. He was born there, like, but family ties. Exactly. That he wanted to be back in the States. It is possible that there's nothing you could have done. However, if there were things you could have done and they weren't done, whose responsibility is that?
For sure.
I assume that's the GM. So if you lost Matthew Tkachuk and you lost what I would argue based on this season, beginning of the season to what's happened literally on Wednesday, Matthew Tkachuk has had the best season of any hockey player in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, that would check out. Yeah,
if you were MVP of start of the regular season to now, it's Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah,
so you lost a generational player in his mid-20s.
Mm-hmm.
That falls on the GM.
It does, and the thing, misreading a relationship or misreading someone's intentions or not maybe having those sort of heart-to-heart conversations. It did seem like you lost a guy that scored 3 game-winning goals in this Eastern Conference final, like someone that can change the complexion of your franchise. Like when I got here, Danny, like back in 2020, like there was sort of scuttlebutt that Tkachuk's antics, for lack of it, like Tkachuk's like on ice persona was starting to grate on guys,
right?
Yeah,
like the COVID season. So that would have been your first season.
Yeah,
it was I had done the back half of 2019, and then the next season, which would have been COVID, would have been the COVID interrupted season, and then the bubble. I didn't do so. I came, but the COVID season fully no fans at the Dome,
and like the Jack Campbell, him falling on, and that seemed like a weird inflection point looking back on this era, right? Like there were reports that the team had a players only meeting after, and Tkachuk maybe was told to kind of quiet down a little bit.
And I think that there were like what the rumor was, and now it's hard.
Yeah,
and I think that why it wasn't super discussed in the media or reported on, because like we only had Zooms. It's not like you could talk to any of these players.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Ask them what was going on, or anything.
We were literally not allowed to be in the same room as anyone. Really.
Exactly. So I don't think we ever really know. But the rumor was that it was Giordano and him, and Giordano told him to cut it out and to calm down, and then Tkachuk didn't have a great season. So it's an important caveat because with all that I'm saying, I had no idea that Matthew Tkachuk was this good.
No, I don't think a lot of people did.
And like, I'll be honest, even coming out of last year, I largely attributed his jump in points to playing with Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah.
Like if you asked me who I thought was the 1A, it was Gaudreau at the time.
Yeah.
And it's probably true. Gaudreau last season probably was the best Flames forward. But I had no idea Tkachuk was going to be this good. And the reality is a lot of the stuff that he's doing in the playoffs, we expected from him in the playoffs for the Flames, and it didn't really happen. So
even dating back like that playoff series where he hurt,
got his numbers up here. Sorry, 16 games played, 9 goals, 12 assists. That's 21 points in 16 games and a plus 10.
And the way he's engaged as well, right? Like how he's dragging his teammates, and he was a little bit quiet in that Dallas series, even didn't we talk about how like the Battle of Alberta, that's Chucky's moment to go absolutely ballistic or sort of show his truest self? And if I recall, he was fairly quiet in that series, which ended exactly a year ago today. But
is that a year ago today?
Yeah, like I think Bob Stauffer tweeted, and I was going to tweet like, holy smokes, the number of changes with this organization. Like it's insane, right? Thinking about the past 365 days, how Jacob Markstrom doesn't look the same, and that's to say nothing of the new direction of this franchise. But like we all kind of thought that series was going to be Tkachuk coming out and showing that narrative about him not playing all that well in the playoffs is BS, and he didn't necessarily rise to that moment. And you wonder, like the number of times he said this season, Paul Maurice, I love coming to the rink, enjoyment. And Danny, I know you've got tweets that were very good about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, it's a lot of what I've already said.
Yeah,
but, I mean, I do think the whole Paul Maurice, he loved coming to the rink was, I don't know that in that moment he was thinking about Daryl Sutter, but him not wanting to stay in Calgary, it's hard not to draw the parallel.
Well, even Craig Conroy a couple of days ago, a number of times he said this has to be a fun place. And
Julian said when we had him on Wednesday, he said he was like, that's a press conference where it's okay to read between the lines a little bit. Because like there was some stuff to read. And I do think that Conroy was clearly saying that Sutter's approach did not work last season. Yeah. And you go back and that is the question. Did Tkachuk just hate playing for Daryl Sutter and didn't want to play for him anymore and requested a trade because of it? I mean, I don't know. None of us know. I don't think he's saying it. And I by all accounts, Tkachuk has a good relationship with Tree. Like that wasn't that wasn't the issue. But did he hate coming to the rink? And now he loves coming to the rink and looks what's happening. Maybe some of the people saying, oh, the Flames players are entitled and all that, maybe they need to check themselves a little bit, because I think you're seeing what sort of I know I got to be careful how I say that, because it may be a colleague of mine who led the charge on that, not Wes. to be clear.
Wes is golfing right now, right?
I believe Wes is in Oregon. I don't know when he's back, but for Wes Gilbertson is my colleague at the Sun of the Herald. He's sort of my leader when it comes to Flames coverage and is amazing at the job, and is also the world's most avid golf fan, and is on a golf trip in Oregon, and it looks absolutely beautiful. He continued to work through Wednesday while golfing.
Really? Wow.
So took a little bit of the burden off me. But yeah, I think that ultimately, like, I think that Tkachuk trade, and it doesn't, what I said is that I actually don't think it matters what you got back. Like, let's say Huberdeau bounces back and becomes a point a game player. I really like what Mackenzie Weegar showed in the back half of the year.
For sure,
To be honest, I watched a lot of Calgary Wranglers this playoffs, as I know you were at a couple games as well. I mean, I didn't watch the away games, but I quite like Cole Schwinn. I like the return. I just don't know that if Tkachuk is this generational player, if this is who he is for the next 6 or 7 seasons, I don't know that there's a return that's good enough for that type of player. Players like that, if we're talking about him being a top 5 forward in the league, guys like that don't get dealt in their mid-20s.
They don't, and I think Bill Zito, the GM, called him a unicorn, and you give up stuff for a unicorn, someone that can agitate, someone that can drag your team into the fight. Like the number of times this current Calgary Flames group looked uninspired and unengaged. That Chicago game in particular, that was sort of their one of the final nails in the coffin. But it's not just the points with Matthew, right? It's the whole package. It's the ability to fight. It's the extracurriculars after the whistle. It's the willingness to lay your body on the line and throw a big hit that can potentially change the outcome of a game or season. Like I was I think in junior high when the Oilers went to the Stanley Cup final. And I always remember, even like close to 20 years later, like the Rafi Torres hit, I think, on Milan Mihalik in the second or third round that tilted the series. And there's so few, and like Torres has next to none of the abilities of Matthew Tkachuk, but like the ability to change a series or like the complexion of a season without scoring a goal, you know, and Tkachuk has that.
But then you add the goals.
Yeah. And that's just, it is something that I wonder, you know, the asset management was something Conroy emphasized. And I wonder, as Tree potentially walks into a situation, potentially in Toronto, where you've got a star that might be on the way out or might not want to commit right away. You know, if you ask Brad, like, what honestly did you learn from this past season? I'm sure he'd be able to write a book, but the Tkachuk situation and dealing a unicorn and just the ability, like letting your star player walk into the final season without pen to paper.
And I wonder, like, again, Brad hasn't really done any, interviews. As far as I know, I don't think he's done any media since.
No, I think he like texted me a comment about Conroy, and he texted like Pierre LeBrun.
Fair, but he hasn't done an interview about leaving or anything like that.
No.
Which I actually sort of, I mean, as a media member, I wish he would, but at the same time, like,
you understand, right?
Oh, 100%. I'm like, I don't know that I'm as confident today as I was 36 hours ago, but like, just us as people who watch and enjoy hockey, like I do. We have I know neither of us have inside information because we had a beer and talked about this 2 nights ago. But like I think Brad, it sure looks like that he's ending up with the Leafs, right?
It would seem likely, right? Like I know who's at Frank Seravalli throughout, Mark Bergevin, Pierre Chiarelli, which would definitely be a fascinating one. And I forgot the other name that Frank threw out there, but it seems like it, right? And for all his tenure, he did have a lot of he has like close to a decade in a Canadian market. He's done a decent job, I think, of selling Calgary to prospective free agents.
His 2 big stars, Gaudreau and Tkachuk, he didn't get contracts to put pen to paper, and you now have there in the next little while, you have Matthews, Marner, Nylander, all their contracts are expiring like within the next season or 2. So you need a guy who can negotiate those contracts. That's my worry with Tree Living, is I don't know that
I think, though, getting Huberdeau to commit as early as he, and like for Huberdeau, like and Weegar as well, Blake Coleman, Jacob Markstrom, Chris Tanev, like those guys had other options, you know, like it was, and I know, like I wonder at the time, like clearly they weren't willing to let go of Sutter until 3 weeks ago. Like this was the guy that they'd hitched their wagon. Like they're certainly not going to let go of him after they won the Pacific title, even though by a lot of accounts there were a lot of challenges with that group last season as well, right? So yeah, I mean, it's a good point though. Like you misread the Gaudreau situation. You can say all you want about how close you were and the fateful car ride that apparently determined his fate, but But number one, you have Toronto. You have an ownership that's generally probably more willing to invest than Murray Edwards, right? It's safe to say you have a lot more resources. You have the allure of a big city. And oh my goodness, if you bring the cup here, like you're immortalized in a way that's maybe next to Montreal, you're never going to get in a Canadian market. Like Tree has the ability to sell a lot more in Toronto than I think he necessarily did in Calgary.
And Conroy specifically, I mean, I wrote about it yesterday, which is a little bit awkward just because of the
Mm-hmm.
we have an election coming up and
Oh
the
yeah,
arena has been turned into an election issue. But like I thought it was notable that Conroy was like, this new arena makes my job easier. Like it is gonna be a big selling point. And I think Calgary is a great place for hockey players. I mean, our guy Pickle Rick, who's the one guy commenting, comment away, guys, did say, you know, the arena weather tax bracket and Johnny leaving probably would have had more weight to Tkachuk leaving than Sutter. And I don't think we fully know. But I hear that. I mean, I hear that. And as I said, I mean, it is entirely possible that Matthew Tkachuk, rightfully, I mean, nothing wrong with it, wanted to live somewhere close to a beach.
Yeah,
where
like a lot of people,
to work. Like,
you know?
yeah, like there's believe me, 95% of the world does not like isn't particularly interested in living in a place where it's cold 7 months a year. I happen to love Calgary and be very happy here and would sell it to just about anybody.
Yeah.
But you know, there is that viewpoint, and in that case, you can't.
And that's where it's intriguing, Danny, because like Craig Conroy played college hockey. He forged a life in Canada. He signed with the Los Angeles Kings before he realized, you know what, Calgary's a little bit better. Like of all people that can present a vision of Calgary as, hey, you know what, I came here, you know, a little bit of a journeyman before I got here, and I built a pretty fantastic family and life over here. Like that's a really good face of the franchise. And like, you know, we've both talked to him, like the enthusiasm that he would deliver that messaging with. Like, I don't think they're going to be big players in free agency this summer. Like they're pretty tight against the cap. They have to trim some stuff, but to have someone like that who's lived it, and unlike Tree who never really played, and like he didn't really have a hockey career, whereas Conroy did, that can also be a really positive addition to how you present.
It's a big part of why I think Conroy is to be honest the perfect choice.
Yeah.
And I think he has people around him. Again, as someone who grew up in Toronto, David Nonis did sign David Clarkson, so like I'm a little bit like make sure Conroy gets to do that part of the job. But I will say, just to sort of to wrap on that, all the sort of Tkachuk leaving, and I do the reason we're talking about Tkachuk, you know, 10 months after the deal is because of what he's doing, and it's just hard not to look at him in the playoffs and think, what if? And that's, you know, again, we were gonna try. I'll just tell people, I had this whole idea where we were gonna try to say, like, if Bradley Tree Living had not made a trade in the last 5 years, where would the Flames be at? And then like I started actually trying to like build out the idea, and it made literally like it was impossible to do because either you have too many players if you include free agent signings or not. But with the Tkachuk trade taken in isolation, I mean, I think that it is worth it may haunt the franchise, to be perfectly honest with you, for a long time. But as for the whole him wanting to stay, as for what our boy Pickle Rick here was saying, Pickle Rick, love the name, by the way. I talked probably 2014, 2015. I'm not going to say the player's name because it was after I turned off my recorder. But he was playing in LA at the time, and he played in Calgary, so people can figure out who it was. But he said, he was like, everyone should play in Canada for 5 years and then finish off their career in the States. He was like, for 5 years, you get to be the biggest deal in town. And then he's like, and then after that, you can walk your kids to school and no one bugs you. And that's always stuck with me a little bit, is remembering like there are reasons to want to play in Canada, and then there are other reasons to want to play in the States. And if you're like, probably it's not Matthew Tkachuk, but I'm willing to bet that if you're a third liner in Florida right now, well, there's a focus on the Miami Heat as well as you. You still aren't getting bugged quite as much as you would be grocery shopping here in Calgary, right? Like there are advantages to that life.
There probably are, I think Calgary, like we've both lived in multiple Canadian markets. Calgary, it seems like people like it's not as crazy as Edmonton, right? Like I'm willing to bet that most of the time these guys can walk in the street and they might get a nod or a hello, but it's nothing compared to.
I mean, we don't need to name them, but you just casually ran into a bunch of Stampeders this weekend.
I did.
Yeah, we're not going to say names, but and you were like, I don't know, it's kind of awkward. I said hi.
Calgary is a weirdly small town, I have discovered, but even like I've run into like Flames players out and about, and like it seemed like they didn't look like they were surrounded by a mob type of thing. Like they just were kind of on their own, and you give a little nod. One of them knew who I was, and he pretended I was the paparazzi, so he covered his face. So that was pretty funny. But and I think the dynamic, it's because Calgary, I think, is sort of a city that has a lot going on, whereas in Edmonton, maybe there's like the focus is on the team 1,000%, and there's the two biggest stars. But I imagine playing in Calgary is one of the easiest Canadian experiences compared to other places. So
I would assume. I truthfully, I don't know. I
Mhm.
mean, if it's Vancouver, you have to live in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So what a nightmare. No, we're not going to.
Why is it a nightmare, Danny?
We're not going to go through
Vancouver?
Let me ask you. Let's transition a bit away while me sort of slowly transitioning. You as a sports fan.
Yeah.
So like this is just us talking as fans.
Sure.
Let's pretend you're a Calgary Flames fan in this specific scenario.
Oh,
Are
wow.
you cheering for the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup final?
If I'm a Calgary, okay, let's say I've got season tickets, like diehard Flames fan.
I asked Ryan Ballantyne this on Wednesday, and he was adamant that it was a no. He was like, I cannot cheer for Tkachuk to win the cup. He was like, Bennett, whatever, but I can't cheer for Tkachuk to win the cup.
I lean towards that because that's such an inflection point for this whole franchise, and you see your.
But we give him credit for doing everything right, for literally like respecting the franchise, telling them in advance, allowing them to deal him. Like he couldn't, as far as requesting trades go, he could not have done it more respectfully.
For sure. Yeah. And that's a big reason why they got a pretty decent haul for him. But you still know that the guy was not willing to sign here long term, right? At the end of the day, he's like, Calgary is all right, but I don't want to be here, right? So those 4 words, if I were, and I love Calgary to death, like as someone that's proud to live here and is willing to bat for the city, like it like, where are you thinking? Like, come on, this is such a great place. Like, and I have no like fandom attached to the team at all, despite what some comments might say. But I just couldn't, right? Because ultimately he did utter those 4 words, and as great as the stuff he did was here and the community involvement stuff, the fact that he stabbed you and like, I don't want to be here,
So did he stab them? I think that's like the pertinent question. And it is worth noting that like my biggest, like as a sports fan, like the team that I love the most has always been the Toronto Raptors.
Okay.
Now since 2019, because we won the championship and they've been pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
Like I'm not as invested in them, but like for years, whether it was Chris Bosh, Vince Carter, all of that, they would leave and I would be like, double middle fingers in the air. I'm never going to root for you. And then it would be like 6-7 years later, and I'd be like, I kind of like you. Like I kind of miss you.
Absence makes the heart
I'm grateful
grow
for what
fonder.
you did for me. And I think for me, look, I'm openly, I am Navarez here saying yes, lifelong Flames fan, go Panthers, fan since 1980. Cool. And that's where I align as someone who does not cheer for the Flames, but like enjoys when they win because my job is better and the city's more vibrant.
We benefit, right? Like,
exactly.
We get more opportunities. Like,
yeah. I'm sort of like, I think it's cool, but I also think it's cool because I've said this many times. I think Matthew Tkachuk right now, like the second the season's over, you're making whoever is responsible for media for the NHL. It's like, that's the guy who I want to see on Jimmy Kimmel. I'm using like very dated references here.
Oh, Jimmy Kimmel's still hip.
But like get him in GQ, get him like all those major media.
For sure,
for me, he's the superstar. And I kind of like think that's cool. And I think that having to watch, and with all due respect, I mean, Connor McDavid is a phenomenal hockey player, but like, I would like it if hockey players were a little bit more like NBA players and were a little bit more expressive and did it. And
Connor's ability to sell the game and market the game has a pretty the ceiling.
I'd argue his willingness to do that. And
sure.
Tkachuk has shown that willingness and has shown like before the Toronto series, sort of making those little like, like not chirps, but under the radar chirps a little bit. So I'm like, okay, Matthew Tkachuk is he's American, so you can promote him to Americans. This is why they should be playing in the Olympics, because I'd like to see this American Olympic team together. But like, that's why I'm kind of rooting for the Panthers, is we got to know him. I largely think he was pretty good, respectful of the media, maybe a little bit like you knew he didn't love us, but still played the game well enough.
He wasn't bad at all. There have definitely been people that have been worse. That's for sure on the Flames.
I think he was largely good with the media. Largely good. And like sometimes players don't want to talk to us, and that's perfectly fine.
For sure. For sure. It hurts our feelings. But but like we are talking about vulnerable moments, right? Like it's totally it's not tough to understand why.
Totally.
So
Jacob Markstrom, 10 minutes after any game is not the time to talk to him.
yeah.
Perfectly personable guy
Mm-hmm.
when it's not 10 minutes after a game.
There's some funny reactions
yeah,
with Jacob Markstrom this season.
Because there really were. Because I love the NHL.
Yeah.
I want the Panthers to win. I think it's the best thing for the league.
Okay. The flip side of that. So assuming Vegas does pull it off like Saturday or whenever, who on Vegas, I guess, is comparable in a selling the game standpoint? Like maybe there isn't anyone, come to think of it, right? Like,
no, I think that Vegas market has grown sort of important for the NHL.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, now we're talking marketing, which I don't know that people always love, but I do think that Vegas, I mean, we saw what with modern marketing, with modern in-house, theatrics, what you can do for a new market. And I do think both Vegas and Seattle were places that we're all aware the NHL should have been.
Yeah.
And they're doing well. So I like it for that.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be people who are going to say, and like, I don't disagree, just like the way that Vegas was able to create this team, they'll never cheer for them because like just the rules that almost felt like they were rigged for one team, for one.
But they still made some incredible value bets, like Riley 100%. Smith in the Florida, like grabbing Shea Theodore from Anaheim. Like they made some incredible. Yeah,
it's not
smart
just
decisions.
that draft. Yeah, for sure. And no, I mean, if Vegas gets in, I mean, technically Dallas is still...
Marchessault is the other guy that they got from Florida. Like that, the way that they fleeced Florida back when Dale Talon was the GM, I think.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Just to think about that now, that those two teams might be meeting.
Yeah, actually, it might not have been Dale Talon, but yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah.
So do you think wins the Stanley Cup? Who do you think is best for the NHL to win the Stanley Cup?
Those might be different questions.
Yeah. So Dallas, we should know. Like, Dallas is still in this.
I think what's best for the NHL is Florida for the reasons that you said, plus the fact that Vegas is already a very strong market, whereas in Florida you've had questions in the past, right? Like they haven't sold out big games previously.
Have you ever been there?
To Sunrise. Yeah, it's in like the middle of
it's the weirdest.
Yeah, it's like a swamp place. Basically. Like
no, it is like I mean, I don't know if it's the Everglades. Yeah. But like it's literally like it's across the street from a swamp. It's what everyone says. Like people tell
like
you
40-minute drive outside. Yeah.
Well, and people tell you these things and you're like, oh no, I don't. Like okay, cool. Like it's across the street, but like I'm not actually kidding. Like you cross the street and it's a swamp.
Well, the aerial shots are always so funny because you see these palm trees and like there's water around it. It's so different, you know.
It's not nice. So I landed there and like this would have been 2019.
Yeah.
And it was the day of CFL free agency. So I worked, but I was like, you know what? I'm going into Miami. I've never been to Miami. I'm going to go. And I'm not kidding. Like it was legitimately raining.
Yeah.
Like in probably 16 degrees.
Yeah.
And like little old Canadian Danny was just walking along the beach, like no shirt on. And I was the only person on South Beach. It was, and then I was like, oh,
that's awesome.
I got to drive an hour and a half to this rink. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go to that many hockey games if I lived in Florida either.
I don't know if I would either. And I don't know, like it's one thing to have the stars. It's another thing to put them in the right spots and make sure that they're getting the exposure and maybe the example of like when Larry met Stanley is changing the way that NHL does stuff, right? Because
that was cool.
It was.
I don't know if people missed that, but on social media in general, the NBA brought out the Larry O'Brien Trophy. The NHL brought out the Stanley Cup. They did like a tour of New York together.
Yeah.
At one point,
it was a spoof of When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah, and the MLS trophy at one point was there as well.
Oh, really?
I believe
that's
MLB.
Cool.
I don't really. That was at a sort of a Jewish deli, and
Kate's is right.
Yeah.
Was that a spot in the movie? I haven't
watched
watched Harry Met Sally in a long time.
It's been a long time. It's a good movie.
Young people probably won't get that reference when Harry.
To be honest, until you pointed it out, I didn't realize. I just thought it was cool that they got the two.
Yeah.
Together. And like, given that those two leagues are direct head-to-head competition right now, it's cool that they're cooperating a little bit.
I think everyone kind of knows the NBA is a few miles ahead of the NHL. So like, where are you competing for? But
a few miles.
Yeah, but it goes to show like marketing traditionally has not been the NHL's strong suit, right? And clearly, like, what was the first? Sorry to go on a tangent. But like the first big thing was who's the in SNL. Let's do that hockey. Like that was one of their first forays.
That was Chance the Rapper. I believe, right?
Yeah. And that like it's good that they're continuing this, and they just have to do it more consistent. And it's not just Matthew Tkachuk, right? Like I still feel like I know nothing about Sergei Bobrovsky. This guy might have had the most up and down roller coaster of a career. And yet somehow, if he wins the Conn Smythe, Danny, there's a good chance he's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. 2 Vezinas, a Conn Smythe. That tends to kind of...
That doesn't get you in the Hall of Fame? What does, right?
But the fact we don't really know a ton about him, or like there's some personalities on that team beyond Matthew Tkachuk that the league should invest money in and pull PR strings and get them out in front of as many faces of casual and non-fans as humanly possible.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Gonna ask you on a completely different note, because I saw a tweet that really pissed me off this week. It was basically like the Leafs trading Austin Matthews and something to Chicago for the Connor Bedard pick, which obviously is absurd.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you in the entire league right now, like you can put together a trade package? Is there anything that you think Chicago would take for that number 1 overall pick? So like
number 1 overall.
I mean, I'm pretty sure if you did McDavid and Draisaitl, maybe they'd consider it.
I mean, okay,
but even then, you're giving up term.
Yeah, you are. Well, like look at not even the hockey player, but the fact that he resulted in what $5 million of season seat revenue within the first 24 hours.
Like it's a no, right?
Honestly, like the first thing that comes to mind might be a package around Matthew Tkachuk. Like,
okay,
as a guy that moves the needle, a personality, someone your fans can gravitate you, plus is pretty good on the ice. That like
you haven't locked him up on.
Yeah,
I mean the money is just
it does. But if you were to open that up to any non-McDavid Draisaitl, I think Tkachuk might be the first one.
I don't mind it as an argument.
Yeah.
I'm not a believer that no. I'm a believer that like given just the way that that contracts work in the NHL,
for sure,
like you're better off having an 18.
Like you might have a 100-point player making 800, 900 grand.
Exactly, right? Like I just think he's the most valuable asset, and don't know where we stand on using asset as a term. Like I know Brad hated referring to players as assets.
Oh yeah, did he?
Oh yeah, he hated calling players assets.
Truly, I didn't catch on to that in my couple of years.
There were a couple press conferences that I covered where he was just like, I hate saying asset.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I don't think that there's anything that you give up. I don't think that there's anything you can really
I don't
offer
think you
me
can.
other than
off-ice value is
potentially
incredible.
Yeah, you give up McDavid. McDavid's the hard one, right?
Yeah,
but like again, then you are paying nearly $12 million versus 800,000.
Yeah,
and do you have the pieces around?
Yeah, it's like Chicago. Does it line up with your competitive window and all of that? So.
Exactly. So yeah, I just wanted to ask that because that bothered me a little bit. Now you have been a little bit, as have I, less than I would like, but around Stampeders training camp.
Yeah.
What have you been saying? You enjoying it?
Yeah, it's awesome. I love covering the Stampeders. Like,
isn't it a breath of fresh air?
It's so nice. Like the players come up to you and they shake your hand. They're like asking you how your days. They know your name. Like it's a different dynamic when you're on a lot more of a level, whether it's economic playing field or like stat. Like like these guys are pretty average guys at the end of the day, and they play a sport.
They're exceptional athletes.
They are incredible athletes that play at such a high level, but just there's not that element of ego, I guess, that exists in the NHL. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. You get to know their personalities a lot more. I think they are generally more interesting human beings. It's safe to say. So it's been a blast. Did some stuff with Reggie Begelton and Jake Mayer today. Just about.
I wasn't sure whether to ask because I didn't want to scoop TSN on whatever you're working on. So
no, it's just pretty straightforward. How's the offense changing? And it seemed. I mean, Dan, you know a lot more about this than I would, but like going from Bo, who's a lot more of a gunslinger, to Jake, who seems a lot more efficient and kind of game manager, like and a very, very phenomenal game manager, but a guy that maybe doesn't throw the ball downfield. So I was just curious how the offense is going to change a little bit. But honestly, man, it's been a blast. Like seeing someone like Rene Paredes do his rare one media interview of the season with Donna Spencer and his new life as a firefighter. Like, it's just cool to see that side of things, because it's a lot more casual. A lot of the times we're in flip flops and t-shirts, and it's a good vibe there.
Yeah. Like I often feel, and like there's nothing more important to me than covering the Calgary Stampeders. It's been a huge part of my career, and an important part that I hope to be able to do for many, many years. But like when I'm at the Flames, I'm always very conscious of like, I don't know, that feels like the job I feel like I'm at home when I'm doing the stamps. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, I wish that we could get more people to sort of tune in. But it's hard. And the truth is, and not to transition fully back to Flames, although I'm not fully done talking about Flames here. The reality is, like, we have had 2 summers where Flame stuff drags into basically August. I mean, when was Kadri signed last year? Was it not August?
It was late August or like mid-August.
And
it wasn't
early, I know all of us in the media are sort of trying to plan our vacations. I'm sure they're trying to plan how to use the studio here. Like, if with these 7 UFAs, and like we might have to trade them or resign. Like, the Flames are going to be dominating the news cycle here in Calgary for at least until mid-July.
Most likely, hey. You wonder about the draft, and I mean, the first domino to fall is Lindholm, right? But this could be like, it seems like every summer there's like they have either, you know, big contracts on the horizon or executives that are departing.
Can I ask you, and this is me acknowledging that I don't pay as much attention to the sort of contract side of the NHL as I should. I'm relatively new, full-time on the beat. Would it be perceived as a mistake by Tree Living that there are 7 UFAs next year? Like, is that too many guys to have their contract expiring same summer? Okay,
well, he acquired Toffoli, so I guess it's the guys that he signed, right? So Lindholm and Hanifin were the 2 from Carolina.
True. Okay.
And then like Zadorov and Tanev, I think, are a little bit like, they're probably the most replaceable, right? So if they walk, or if
I don't know if Tanev is replaceable so much as he's going to be mid to late 30s and
easy to move on from. I guess
has a lot of injuries.
Yeah,
like, I don't know that and
there's no doubting his value to the room.
No, everyone, like, we all respect Chris Tanev, but like, you're not signing him for more than 1 year at a time going forward,
maybe 2. Yeah,
maybe 2. Given he's through no fault of his own, like, he's played a lot of minutes in the NHL. Exactly. So now Zadorov, I actually think, like, if you can get him at a decent number, is sort of a useful defenseman. I
wonder if he's finished,
scored a hat trick in the final game of the season,
answering my question about the thing he learned the most from.
He's a talker, but like, Zadorov, like, seems super popular with teammates, with opponents, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he can do the job for you.
I think so, and I think he wants to be here, right? That's a big thing that's facing this franchise these days. So
I'm such a terrible host because I bounce from thing to thing. Julian brought this up. Do you resign Troy Stecher right now?
No, I don't. I think you have to get meaner on your defense core. So
the possibility of trading Hanifin, trading Tanev.
Yeah.
At that point, you're getting Shillington back, so you probably need.
Yeah, and that's where like Shillington and Stetcher's skill set is kind of the same, right? Small puck moving defensemen that don't have the best defensive IQ at times, but can provide a little bit there.
So interesting. So no to Stetcher. Stone?
I think you got to move on. Like, I think they missed Eric Branson a lot this season, actually. Like someone that can clear the net, prevents opponents from getting inside position.
We've got this up for the record. I don't know really what to do with it. Sorry. This is the graphic. This is so yeah, you've got Hanifin. So okay. Keep going. I apologize. The graphic came up. I decided to look at it because I thought that it was timed. So I felt like I had to talk about it. Yeah, so you've got, again, in terms of their defensemen, you have, Dennis Gilbert next year. But then, Zadorov, Tanev, and Hanifin. I'm saying that Tanev, I think that you probably shop.
I could see that. I could also see Hanifin. Like, if he, I don't know. Like, I don't know, even if Hanifin does want to re-sign here, like, I wonder if you just try to change the mix of that a little bit. Like, they had challenges in the defensive zone this season. They were,
well, we're assuming that Weegar and Anderson is the top pairing next year, right? Yeah. So you're then losing your 3, and I just have trouble seeing. Maybe Tanev wants to resign and do short-term contracts here. And if he does, great. I think you take him, but I'm not sure that like making him a priority necessarily makes sense.
No, not necessarily, right? Like, you have to prioritize your 2 centers plus Hanifin, right? That's got to be your
Hanifin's the interesting one. Like
like he's half a point per game or more the past couple of seasons.
Hanifin's the one player, like, let's be honest. Hanifin's the one player who, other than Lindholm, probably, well, Toffoli as well, but I don't know at Toffoli's age what you're getting back. If you want a useful, legitimately productive piece, like 82 games a year, Hannafin and Lindholm are going to get you those. Now, I'm a believer that with Lindholm, you also want young assets or draft assets.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for Hannafin, what are you looking for?
So a defenseman that's a little bit younger and maybe less offensively inclined, but a little more bite. What else? You ideally they don't have a great prospect pool right now, like beyond the obvious names on the Wranglers that stood out. I don't know if there are a ton of NHL ready guys necessarily. So I'd prioritize getting
No.
I'd prioritize getting a younger NHL defenseman that has a little more bite, and then something around like.
So which AHL guys next year are playing, and I'm including Walker Dewar here.
Yeah.
We did this with Julian as well, but which NHL guys are playing or AHL guys this year are playing 60 games in the NHL for the Calgary Flames next year?
Okay, Dewar for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced Coronado will play a ton of NHL games next season, and just development of a young forward, stick him in the AHL and let him acclimate that way.
He's looked good at Worlds, apparently.
Yeah,
I haven't actually watched it, but just based on what Aaron Vickers is tweeting.
I mean, I could see Dustin Wolf getting 10 to 15 games. I mean, that'll be an interesting conversation because that basically means you're moving out Vladar, right? I'm gonna miss Vladar.
Pelletier's gonna get.
Yeah, Pelletier for sure. I think he's penciled in. He has in pen like a top 9 slot. I don't think Zary will play like 60, but I could see him getting an extended call up.
Ruzechka, who doesn't really count as an AHL guy, but
I don't see a spot for him next season. I think they've had challenges with him in different facets, and I just don't see it. I think I just don't see him being back with the organization. And then Matthew Phillips is, to me, sort of an interesting wild card. Where do you give him a 25, 30 game audition and just say, you'll get 15 minutes a night, go show us what you can do? Or does he want that? Does he feel like he's been bitten a little bit by this organization, his hometown team, a few too many times? So,
okay. Final question before we just kind of shoot the shit for 5 more minutes, but we'll stick squarely. Is Mitch Love, is he your odds-on favorite for the head coaching job? Not saying will he get hired, but do you think he is the most likely hire?
I think it's Ryan Huska still by a little bit, not by a lot, but I think Huska knows the players a lot more. People point to Jay Woodcroft going from the American League to the NHL, but if I'm not mistaken, Woodcroft had a lot of years as the video coach for who was it, Detroit and San Jose under Todd McClellan. He was around that environment a lot, and he got to know players and build relationships that way. I just Love doesn't have that experience. He's done phenomenal work. A lot of the players on the Wranglers rave about him. I know that they wanted the NHL and AHL systems to be identical. So I don't know if we've seen sort of a true Mitch Love X's and O's type of thing. For all we know, he might be an offensive savant that sort of goes in line with what Craig Conroy was talking about. I just think with Huska, he's extremely good tactically. Their penalty kill has been really solid. The development of defensemen, Rasmus, Anderson, Noah Hafen have taken big steps. I think even some of Uyghur's strong play in the second half can be attributed to Ryan Huska. The fact he's been in the environment for a couple of years now, I think he's your odds-on favorite by a little bit, but I think a promotion of some sort is pretty much guaranteed for Mitch Love. That's for sure.
And a promotion would be a NHL assistant coaching job.
Yeah, or even potentially outside the organization.
Curious. I think he's going to have bites from other teams.
Oh, for sure.
For the head coaching job. And I mean, we've got the stuff up here. I mean, does not have that NHL experience, but obviously has a ton of WHL as well.
For sure, yeah.
2 really pretty impressive seasons in the AHL.
And look at the young players that have taken big steps under his belt, like Dustin Wolf, and
completely.
Pelletier was a point of game player as a mid first round pick in the American League. I think as a rookie too, which is not common. So
yeah. And I mean, as you said, the players do seem to love him, which we can't spend the time we did talking about Tkachuk without acknowledging that. However, I think the players would love Ryan Huska too, so that's not necessarily a bonus for either of them. What else are you looking forward to this summer, man? We can talk about anything. We got my buddy Brett who has arrived. He's gonna be
Real
on.
celebrity in the house there. Holy,
Well,
he's
I
a
know.
musician.
Yeah, he is the. I mean, he's honestly just like one of my closest friends, but he also is the lead singer of a band. I know you were coming on June 2nd to their album release party, the Beta Boys, popular band here in Calgary. We're going to talk about that. We're going to move off sports a little bit, so we'll see how that does for viewership. But we are also I watched the entire 2019 Raptors run with him. He's a guy I watched a ton of sports. So I kind of wanted to promote the Beta Boys a bit. And I know you are friends with Brad and you're going to be at the show. But what else are you looking forward to this summer, man? We got a couple minutes here. We can talk about anything.
What am I looking forward to? I mean, I'm going back to Montreal for a wedding with Julian, actually. So it'll be a nice little college reunion there.
If Julian is getting married and not telling me, I'm going to be real upset.
I don't think it's Julian getting married.
Okay.
That would be pretty cool though if we ended up at his wedding whenever that happens. He's got a long line of suitors, but
do you think Julian's the first of us to get married?
He could be. Yeah. I think he's a very kind boy, extremely talented sports journalist, very well dressed. He pulls off the turtleneck and suit extremely well.
Next time, just for the record, just want to make sure our producers know. Next time we have Julian on, I want him the little thing, not to say athletic journalist, it's to say kind boy. Because that's what Salim called him.
What else beyond the wedding? I don't know. I played my first round of golf yesterday, so I'm getting back into that. I just was at Shagganappy, 9 holes, played really well. I don't know, more sunsets with you on my balcony. Not to get too cheesy. I don't know. It'll be nice. Like I did my big Europe trip last summer, so it'll be a lot more laid back this time. I actually have a car for the first time in my adult life. I got last year at the age of 29. I got my first ever vehicle. I never had one in my life.
You say that, except I bought a car off my aunt when I moved here.
Yeah.
After borrowing her minivan for 2 years, and then I went a long time without a car. And I bought one in 2021 as a 37-year-old. So you have nothing.
I never had a used one though. I never had like my dad's beater or anything. Like never ever. And then like the girl I was dating at the time, like she was awesome, but she would be pressuring me to get a car. And at one point she was like, if we have kids, are we going to be taking them on the C train everywhere? And it was sort of a weird light bulb that went off in my head that I'm 29 now. I should probably get on this. And then obviously we broke up, but my first phone call in the car was to her, and we had a nice little exchange then. But
beautiful story.
It was
a young love.
Romantic. But no, beyond that, like hanging out with you, like and Julian and Pat Steinberg, and other like Aaron Vickers and Cammie, like nice little tight media contingent here. So I'm sure we'll spend lots of time together. And
got lots of Stampeders football to talk about. It's I will say that at 2:30 we're gonna have Jeff Hamilton on from the Winnipeg Free Press, who I believe is the last traveling newspaper journalist covering the CFL.
Wow.
Yeah. So
is he going to all games?
Well, I'm going to ask him for sure.
That's awesome.
But obviously, Post Media.
The Free Press is a phenomenal newspaper. Like they do incredibly good work.
I don't know how much I should start talking about.
Oh right.
I mean, Salim Valji says, "What a kind boy." No, I mean the Free Press is a great paper. I love all newspapers. So, but yeah, we are. I mean, we're not on the road this year, and as far as I know, they'd be the only independent sort of company covering it. So yeah, Jeff Hamilton, super smart guy. I'm going to talk trash about the Bombers, and I'm sure he'll talk trash about the Stamps. That'll be fun. But we're gonna keep busy.
Division final preview.
You're gonna go to some Calgary Surge games. They launch.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go tomorrow for sure.
Are you going tomorrow?
It's cool. I've never been to like the first like of a franchise opening type of thing, so that'll be really cool. I'm gonna go to the red and white game first, and then drive off after. But it's kind of neat to see the city embrace basketball. It seems like they've done a good job. Like Jason Ribeiro, I think the owner's name is. They've done a great job in kind of building the support from the grassroots, and you don't really think of Calgary as like a basketball city necessarily. So I'm curious how, seeing a game at WinSport, how that looks. And
I've seen a game there. They held they have like a non-NBA team, which have like a Champions League of the Americas.
Yes, yeah.
So the Edmonton Stingers had won the CEBL championship, and I think this would have been last year. And they had the Canadian leg of the Champions League games here in Calgary at WinSport, and I gotta say it was phenomenal. And I'm not, to be honest, I'm not doing any promo for them here. Legitimately awesome, legitimately like a professional setup. You felt, I mean, I've been to a lot of NBA games, and I'm not saying you quite felt like you were at an NBA game, but it wasn't far off. Like it was really, really cool. And I will strongly recommend everyone check out the Calgary Surge. I
Yeah,
don't know,
I'll
it'd be
be
cool.
tomorrow there.
We've
for
seen
sure.
the city. You know, I heard for so long when I moved here, this is the hockey market, and you know the Stampeders work as well. And so
Yeah.
to see Cavalry now
Yeah,
succeeding, to know that we have a women's professional soccer league team coming within the next year or two,
Yeah.
and now to see the Surge, like and I hope I'm not missing anything here, but I think it's really cool. I think it's good for it. It shows that this city has a lot more going on than just one sport. We're hockey guys. We spent the first 55 minutes talking hockey here.
Shocker.
But it's great. I think it's awesome. And I think that I really think the Surge are going to succeed. And I think that packing that house tomorrow.
Yeah, are you going to be there, or are you at
we'll talk about that later, man. I don't know what my weekend holds.
I'm
going hiking with Max Campbell on Sunday. So but here we go, man. Honestly, this has been awesome. I super appreciate you coming in. You texted me this morning and like we've just freewheeling it. I was like, yeah, man.
That's more fun, you know.
Exactly. So I hope it worked, and now we're gonna just have Brett on. So thank you so much, man. I may see you later. Honestly,
I know. There have been a few nights recently that either in that media chat, people
which I have muted, so I don't get any of the I literally, if I were to open my WhatsApp,
I'm gonna assume that we will be ending up seeing each other somewhere on this Friday night.
100%. I have 402 unread messages in the media group chat. So thank you so much, buddy.
We have to we have to choreograph an NBA handshake and do it on air next time. I think that's our next. We can work on that tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if people can see our background. It's wild right now. But thank you. That is Salim Valji. I apologize from TSN. He's the best, and we're so grateful to have him here.
Awesome. Talk to you soon, buddy. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Cheers, bud. All right. So I'm gonna kind of just vamp here for you're good.
Okay.
And if you want to let Brett know how to come in, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I've never actually had to transition from one guest to another. Brett, you're just gonna come sit over here if you're down. Put on some headphones. This is we're just going in front of the cameras now. Solid. Great podcasting here. So I am really hyped here in the Oodle Noodle studio. Brett, just come sit down. You put on the headphones, you talking to the mic. One of my very, very best friends in the world. Reason you were on here, your name is Brett Sanford. He is the lead singer of Calgary band The Beta Boys, who are, I will argue, my favorite Calgary band. Maybe my favorite band. I was listening to you guys on the way over. New single out today, as well as your album release party next Friday. It is Friday, right? June 2nd would be Friday.
Friday, June 2nd. And also respect for getting my name and all the details correct, Danny. Well done.
I did, right?
You did, yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know that I'm a professional, but I do my best here, guys.
Fool me, man. Yeah, we're good.
We're good, buddy. How you doing?
I'm good. Had a run around day today. Yesterday, we've been doing some promo for our new album, and it's been great so far. So the response has been fantastic, and we've been having a good time and getting ready for the show. We got some special things in line for the show.
Yeah. So the theme is retro prom.
Yeah, we're calling it a spring formal.
Okay.
Is where we're going with that. And so not only are we trying to transport the people of Commonwealth Bar and Stage on June 2nd via some decorations. There's a Polaroid photo booth where the band will take your photo and you can have a souvenir keepsake.
That's sick.
We got some new merch rolling out. And then we also have some additions, which we don't usually have for the show. So we got, instead of one saxophone player, we have literally doubled the amount of saxophone players.
Two saxophones.
Two. So there's
buddy, you're really doing it.
Yeah. Well, and it's great too, because one plays a big saxophone and one plays a little one, and they harmonize and sexier. I would say it's real nice.
I can't wait. Can I ask? We've been friends for what, 6-7 years now?
Yeah.
I think the number of times that I've seen you not wearing black is maybe twice. What? I don't want to spoil anything, but can we expect some colorful Brett?
Yeah, you're gonna see some large suit jackets. You're gonna see some creatively printed open shirts. You're gonna see it's prom, but it's also cocktail hour on a cruise ship, dare I say.
So we
at
are.
sunset.
This
Yeah,
sounds
it's-
seductive.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. It's good. And it's, the music's all like 1980s kind of stuff, as and it kind of like really leans pretty hard into that stuff. Whereas it's it's sincere, but it's also kind of goofy. But there's a lot of keyboards and a lot of fun, and
Yeah,
it's good.
I mean, I have obviously seen you guys live. I will say part of why I wanted to have Brett on. Like, honestly, if you were looking for something to do on Friday, beta boards are so much fun, man. Like, you guys do have fun. Like,
We do have fun. Like.
Yeah.
And I think it's like all of the people in this band, they're in other bands too. And I think this is like the one project where we can come together, and it's interesting that it's sort of begun to take off and get some traction, because it was sort of the project that people cared the least about. And that is,
I remember.
yeah. And it almost made it so that kind of laissez-faire type attitude gave it all of its charm. And now we've actually been working on it, and the results we're really happy with.
That's awesome. And I mean, Commonwealth that's a pretty big size venue.
It's a big room. It's a big room. Yeah. Like I've been able to play it before. And it sounds great. But yeah, a lot of, as a performer, I say there's a lot of floor. You know what I mean? So it looks great when it's packed. And
I will say that, I mean, partially just because I have told my friends, guys, you got to check it out.
Yeah.
Guys who are friends with you but may not have seen you before. I know Salim's going to be there. Like, there's a bunch of us who are coming, and I've told people, I'm like, you guys are a band you can dance to, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You guys are. You have been in other bands that were a little bit less dancey.
Absolutely.
But your new single, I'm gonna bring up the name, Weekday Strangers, dropped today.
Weekday
Man,
Strangers.
I was cruising through it with the windows down. You should have seen me. I don't know that I was getting checked out because I'm a near 40-year-old man in my Toyota Corolla, but people should have been checking me out. I looked great. I looked cool. I had the guns. I rolled my sleeves up a little bit. I felt cool. I felt sexy.
With looks like that and a whip like that, you're gonna get checked out, Danny.
No doubt.
It's gonna be a thing.
Salim is now actually leaving. He stayed for a little bit. I'm going to ask you, or we will talk more Beta Boys.
Sure,
But,
absolutely.
You and me, a big part of our friendship has been kind of watching sports. What have you been watching recently?
I've been enjoying. Well, I was enjoying. I'll say the word. I'll use loosely, but I've been enjoying up to the last 2 weeks Blue Jays baseball quite a bit.
Okay.
I mean the team's struggling, but I like to think that they are one of the most exciting teams in baseball. They're very dynamic. They can blow out an opponent. They can get blown out. Every inning matters in Blue Jays baseball, for better or worse.
Which is crazy because it's an 162 game season.
I know
it doesn't normally feel like that.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And then I was listening to some conversations about this historically poor start that Alek Manoah's had, and what the alarm bells for that look like. Because you're right, it's a 162 game season, but some of his numbers, he's one of the worst starters in the league.
Which is crazy, isn't it?
Which is crazy, especially you look at last season and how dominant it was. And, there's a lot of talk about, the pitch clock and how maybe that's affected him, and how base runners are stealing more often and all this kind of stuff. And it's a new game. I think this season more than any other season, we all knew that was going to happen, but watching baseball right now is this engrossing thing to me.
Well, because it's also, I don't know that, and I haven't been watching, because to be perfectly honest with you, my life has been, as you're well aware, just constant Calgary Flames.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to ask you about Conroy, but
it
has been, this has been a relatively busy couple of weeks for me.
Yes.
So I haven't watched a ton, but the cool thing is that you only get this every once in a while, where everyone has to figure it out on the fly.
Totally.
So with this pitch clock thing, teams are not I'm trying to think, I guess probably after the lockout in 04-05, that would have been the last time we saw NHL teams have to figure out what type of players you wanted to sign, what
100%.
There were so many rule changes, and I like that about baseball right now, is that they haven't figured it out. They are,
no.
And a different type of player has value that they might not have had a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was awesome. I want you to tell the story because it remains. You were at a French Open final.
I was. Yeah.
It was. You were in Europe, and I just literally remember, I'm trying to think. You and I went to a photography show a couple weeks ago, and
yes.
I biked down, and we were hanging out with a buddy by the Bow River, drinking non-alcoholic beverages at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night.
Absolutely.
By the river. But And we were talking, we were like, hey, what's the coolest sporting event you have ever been to? And I don't actually think it's what you named, but I was like, nah, man, French Open final is the coolest.
Yeah, I mean, French Open final was incredible. Very cool.
Who was playing? How do you get the tickets?
Okay, so I was in Paris in a extended work / personal type capacity. And so I wanted to go to Roland Garros. And so I entered the ticket buying lottery for both the men's and the women's finals. And I lost the men's lottery. I was not able to buy the tickets, right? And then, but the women's, I got pinged and I won. And so I did a little bit of research and got in on the side of the court that shades over first.
So they don't assign you tickets? Like it's literally like, okay, you're now welcome to enter the portal.
Yeah.
Buy wherever
Yeah.
you want. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So they're not like, you win this ticket or these 2 tickets. They're like, you win, jump on in. Or at least that's what it was. I think we're 2018 or 2019. The timelines are a little fuzzy. At that time, but I think it's 2018. And so I got us on the side of where it's shaded over first, because people are like, you're going to get roasted in a Paris heat wave here. And so we did it. And so got in there, and it was Simona and Sloane Stephens. And it was incredible. It was great. It was just, and everything about it. You go to a sport event like that, and it's like, if you've been to enough North American sports or sports in North America, you kind of know what to expect. Like there's the change in the room, and there's all that. There's all those little small things. But then you go to something like a Grand Slam, if you've never been to one, and it's just like the majesty of the courts and how
100%.
much effort, and the people watching is incredible. So you go in there, and instead of,
can I just quickly, when you say people watching, is it all rich French people?
It's kind of like everything. It's kind of like there's people that you're like, this person looks like they were born to attend this event. So in that regard, yes. And then there's people who you're just like, wow, like it is fair. Like there's all kinds of tourists, you know what I mean? And tourists that like, there's tourists, and then there's tourists that look like tourists.
Of course.
And there's both kinds, you know what I mean? I like to think I'm one and not the other, but you'd have to ask a local. But and so you go in there, and you're just looking around in awe. It's sort of like this weird thing where it's like, if you've never really heard of Disney World before, and you go to Disney World and you're walking around, you're like, what is this? Everything is a thing. Which,
like, let's be very clear that I've never been to Disney World, but nobody loves roller coasters more than you.
That's true.
It's one of the weirdest parts of your identity. You and our other buddy Lee just talk about roller coasters all the time.
Yeah, everybody's got to like something.
Everybody's got to like something.
Everybody's got to like something.
I can't contribute. I'm afraid of heights and don't like roller coasters.
That's all right, man.
Love a log ride.
Hey, everyone loves a good log flume.
I love a log flume. Yeah, so it is like you felt that majesty because
absolutely. And then you look around, and there's not hot dogs and beer. There's crepes and champagne,
as it should be.
And when someone nudges you and said, shall we get a crepe and champagne? I'm like, yes, absolutely. We should for sure do that.
Middle of the day at a Paris heat wave, a crepe is what I want.
Yeah. Guzzled by a champagne. I mean, maybe I still have to learn how to look like while I'm drinking it. I need to look like a local while I'm drinking it. I think I still look quite a bit North American, but hey, that's fine. I'm enjoying myself.
Exactly.
Right.
So, I mean, it's interesting because also I argue that the first sporting event I ever went to, like we've run into, you were at Game 7 last year at Dallas, Calgary. Like we've run into each other, which we'll talk about. We've been to a lot, but I think the first one would have been the Masters at Spruce Meadows, right?
Yes.
I think that's the first time you and I ever went to a sporting event.
Yeah. That's funny you say that. I wouldn't have picked that out of the ether, but you're entirely correct.
Kick back, watch them show jumping, had a great time.
Incredible.
That has the majesty.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so cool.
It's wild that it's in Calgary.
Well, and it's like a distinctly city person. Like, I love the mountains. I spend a lot of time out there, and I love the outdoors, but like I'm not around, equestrian show jumping or horses in general. And so to see them, you're just like, oh my God.
I generally have a rule that if someone has a horse in their online dating profile, I won't swipe right. I won't say yes.
Danny red flag.
I can't afford to support a horse.
Have you considered that they're independent people and they can support the horse themselves? They don't need you, man.
I've just let's move on. I know I'm not saying that I need to support my partner. That's not at all what I'm getting at. You were at Game 7.
I was at Game
last
7.
Year. Johnny Gaudreau, overtime goal, crazy.
Nuts.
Is that your top Calgary sporting event that you have attended? And does the way it ended with Gaudreau and Tkachuk just a short month and a half later, does it take away from it at all?
I'd say it's probably, for me, the biggest Calgary sporting events I've ever attended would maybe like the Heritage Classic when they did it at McMahon Stadium, just because of like how unique that was really good too. But I think Game 7 definitely beats that. And it also wasn't minus 25 inside the stadium,
That's true.
which was god awful, but great. You know, like I was happy to be there and I had a great time. But talking specifically about Game 7, like unbelievable. Like
it's the biggest outpouring like of emotion because it was a combination of like elation with relief, if that makes sense.
Totally.
I've ever, like that, the organization, the players, but like the fan base, they needed to win a playoff series, and it had been building, and like maybe it not building in a way that it's built for the Leafs over all of these years. And like especially the way that series had gone, where Oettinger just stood on his head, and it really felt like the Flames deserved to beat. I mean, the Stars were a good team, but like the Flames were the better team, and just Oettinger was amazing.
Yeah.
And then for it to come down to overtime, like it was so tense. You could like, I don't know that I've experienced anything. There are a couple big fights that just back when I used to cover the UFC that like sort of had that tension a little bit, but like that's different because it's not everyone cheering together for one thing.
Totally.
But, like that goal was unique in my career. And obviously my career is watching sports. I've been at a lot of events, and yeah, it's just the only thing that sucks about it is that it's then like it just ends so quickly after that.
Yeah.
But that night taken in isolation is very special.
Well, I mean, I guess it's a metaphor for life, Danny. You need to enjoy the good times while they're happening, because you never know when you're getting ousted in 4 or 5 around the corner.
I know, and then Gaudreau signs elsewhere.
And then we all know what happens. But no, I mean, like that goal gets scored, and it's like I'm in Rome during Gladiator or something. Like it's at that level. Like I was up and I was 3 seats from the back of the wall, and the goal goes in, and I couldn't sit with my friends. We couldn't get seats together. So I was sitting 2 rows in front of my friends, which was chill, you know. Yeah. And there's, you know, these 2 young guys.
I was sitting in a decrepit press box.
Yeah. Well, these 2 young guys were next to me. I made friends with everybody. It was like weird because it's like I find like some sports you make friends with people in your section, but like, you know, this was usually at Flames games. I don't, not for any other reason than the fact that it doesn't. It's like when you sit down on an airplane, and sometimes you talk to the person, sometimes you don't. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing. But I like became like the camaraderie in the stands was incredible. And like I remember when the goal happened, we were all cheering, right? And the guy who I just met turns, he high fives his buddy, looks at me, he hugs me, and he hugs me so hard that we like wipe out into the row in front of us, and like the people are holding us up, and like I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And the guys, everyone's like, it's cool. And it was just like such a great moment. And
you feel like you're part of something.
You feel like you're part of something. It's like obviously it's a metaphor for why we watch sports in general. It's just like, it's incredible.
So as a Flames fan,
yeah,
are you rooting for Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett to win the Stanley Cup this year? I've asked a lot of like my media, like Julian and Salim have both been in here this week, and I've asked them, if you were a Flames fan, would you? But you are an actual Flames fan. You are not in media. You don't have to be objective.
No.
Do you want them to win the Stanley Cup?
I think I don't really care who wins the Stanley Cup at this point.
Okay.
I care to watch. Like I don't care who wins, but I care very much to watch it. Okay. You know, and I think that it's kind of an interesting time as a sports fan, because I think the best thing about the final, especially if Vegas goes through, you're going to see 2 people who've never won a Stanley Cup.
Mm-hmm. 2 fan bases, yeah.
And obviously, when I break it down to fan bases, 2 markets that have never won, I kind of want Florida to win, because like they put, like, if you're a Florida Panthers fan, and if you're like a legacy Florida Panthers fan, nothing
you've been through it.
Yeah, especially like, I mean, obviously being a Vegas Golden Knights fan is a completely different thing. And you know, if a sport comes to your town and you're passionate about it, you know, like but just like the length of time it takes, like look at how many teams there are in the league and what your odds are just statistically of winning a Stanley Cup, taking your
Oh, 100%. My mom gets really upset because my mom, because I cover the Flames, has become a Flames fan.
yeah.
And like every time that we talk on the phone, I have to be like, Mom, like I'm not actually a fan.
Yeah.
Like it's actually okay. And I think that her thing is she wants them to make the playoffs because it's good for my job and good for my career and you
Totally.
have more eyeballs on your work. But also, like, she just watches on Google. So
Amazing.
It's not even, my parents don't have cable because they only watch the CBC News. But so she watches it on her phone and will like text me being like, I'm so sorry that they're losing 3-1. I'm like, shut up. Like, Mom, it's okay.
Like, it's
And
fine.
I cannot emphasize enough because and my mom is a sports fan, like, it's not like she's ignorant, but like, I do try to explain that like one team wins and everyone else ends up disappointed.
Absolutely.
And with Panthers fans, there has been that disappointment. My main thing is I just like, honestly, I think what Matthew Tkachuk is doing is really cool. And like, yeah, I wish for Calgary sports fans, I wish it was happening in Calgary, but like 3 game winning goals in one playoff series is insane. And like
unbelievable.
And I like that he doesn't talk trash, but he's not quiet in the media. He doesn't like try to avoid any controversy. I love like all the things that I think would have been great if they were happening in Calgary. The fact that they're happening in Florida doesn't bug me, but I also am not that emotionally invested.
No, and it's like, I don't know. Like
I couldn't have dealt with the Oilers winning. Like I didn't.
I mean, you know, I'm a Flames fan. I'm not originally from Calgary, but I've lived here most of my life. If the Flames are out, I don't have a huge problem with it. And I know I'm in the minority of that. And sometimes I got to watch where I say that because, you know, your friends get a little heated. You know, especially because I have a lot of friends from Calgary and Edmonton.
Let's just put it out there. I dated an Oilers fan, and we are no longer dating, so I'm rooting against the Oilers.
Hey,
like, I'm petty. I'm not. I'm a good person in other ways, but as it relates to my exes and their hockey teams, and that's every ex, I don't want them to win in hockey.
You know, I mean, everyone's got their reasons, Danny.
Does that make me a bad person?
No,
I don't know.
No, I don't think so. Some people dislike the entire city. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like, so
I want nothing but good things for Edmonton.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Shout out Edmonton.
Yeah, they got a cool bridge.
Yeah. Great bridge.
Great bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you happy with Craig Conroy as the GM?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, watch his presser and tell me how it's not kind of exciting. Just the energy he brings. And as far as a general manager goes, he seems like he's quite candid. He seems like he's outgoing. He seems like he's a great person. When I take into my life, when I work in any type of professional capacity with somebody like Craig Conroy, the way that I perceive him, it seems like he's a pretty positive person to be around. And I think that's a thing that really like instills itself from the top down. And so when I see that, that's what I see. And I see if there are problems, if he brings that type of energy into private conversations behind closed doors, wow. I mean, he seems like he's a problem solver. He seems like he's motivated. He's very friendly. And I think that's that kind of like softening of the business, I think goes a long way when it comes to taking care of the people underneath you.
Which, given the negativity, and I can say this as someone sort of who covered the team, like there was a sense that this was not a particularly happy work environment for a lot of people over the last year. And I'm not actually putting that on the GM. I'm not putting that on Brad Treliving. But I do think like as they move forward, and they have, Don Maloney sort of said, this has to be the start of a new era.
Yes.
You lose your head coach and your GM at the same time. Basically, you have to be building from scratch. And if that is sort of one of the foundational pieces, is that like people have good relationships and you know, they speak and they communicate and are kind to one another, which is so corny to say, but I genuinely, if I'm a Flames fan, that makes me happy. That's
Same.
What I want for my organization. That's what I want from my team. You know, like I have always, as a Raptors fan, what Masai Ujiri represents and who he is and how he does business is something that makes me like my team more. It makes me proud to be a Raptors fan. And I think I've heard, you know, both from you and from other fans, that matters as a fan.
Absolutely. It's like, what do you want to cheer for this team that has this like toxic work environment, you know? And I'm not saying that's where it was. I mean, that's purely for someone like me, it's speculatory, but it's not hard to see like with what comes out of there. And it's nice to see that like I think it's right. I think you're right. It's the start of a new era. And I think that's exciting as a fan. And even just having that, and it's like, okay, like there was so much discussion about the coaching specifically. And then, obviously the GM situation was a bit of an elephant in the room, and everybody, nobody knew what was going to happen, at least from me and a fan base. And it was interesting to see. Fascinating. It's exciting. And it's like, okay, like we had a season that was very disappointing and things changed. And I think that's like, sometimes I think that it's like, you take a look at how many 1-goal games that club played, and it's like,
they weren't that far off.
They weren't that far off. They weren't that far. It was just like something just had to click. You know what I mean? And so that's maybe a place where I see, like, I usually read the comments and I usually like listen to the shows. And I think that a lot, I think part of the fan base doesn't understand just how close it was and how this is like truly a game of inches.
I don't necessarily know that it's not understanding so much as being like, this is a results-based business.
Yeah, true.
Fair. And I think a lot of the fan base wanted the results.
Yeah, and I mean that's where the fun comes, right? You win Game 7, you have the greatest time, but to win Game 7, you gotta win enough in the first 82 to make it in.
Exactly. And yeah, I will just say that also as a media member, like that press conference, the exact thing that you felt, I just felt in a way that like actually affects me personally, because like I would like to go into, and that's not me rooting against Daryl Sutter by any means, but like if that was the most fun I've had at a press conference, just because I was like, oh, the answer is like, this is actually interesting. I can go and unpack this and think about what it means. And that positivity like rubs off on me too. And I want to go into a work environment that, gives me things to think about and write about. And
that's what's conveyed to us, to the fans.
Exactly. So, let's finish off. We got about probably 3 minutes here. We've talked about the Beta Boys.
Yeah.
I think we should talk about them again. Let's
Let's
throw back. This is old school radio more so than podcasting, but just next Friday at Commonwealth. But also people should be checking out the album. In general, which obviously drops on Friday. There they are, the Beta Boys. You can't see it, but we got your Instagram up right now.
Amazing.
Looking absolutely fly at the Eau Claire market.
We are. Yeah, we did band photos at an abandoned hour of the Eau Claire market. It was wonderful.
But if people do kind of are thinking next Friday, they want to come check out some music, just tell them again what they should be expecting, because it's going to be such a good time. I'm calling it the party of the summer, whether you are or not.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can call it that. We're excited about it. And so we have Beta Boys, 80s inspired, new wave, fun to dance to. We have our new album coming out. There's 2 songs from the new album out already. The full album drops next Friday on the 2nd.
They are on every platform.
Every platform.
I'm an Apple Music user.
Yep, that's you.
And I don't know why.
Yeah, well,
everyone tells me Spotify is better. I mean, I don't think either of them. Spotify is not sponsoring this either. It's an Apple Music, so I can just offer an opinion. Honestly, like Apple Music is on my phone.
Yeah, it's like the one. It's like the one you choose. Sometimes it's like there's no rhyme or reason. You just stick with it, and it's like, why do you listen to Apple Music? It's because, well, I always did, and that's why you distribute your music through all those channels, because just people have that.
Exactly.
But yeah, we got 2 great opening bands for us, Krill Williams and Sea of Lettuce, both like incredible, dancey, wonderful, all over the place, some spooky, some, fun, really great bands we're playing with. So we're excited about that. And the nice thing about having an album release party is you get to choose the bands. So we chose these specifically and there's so much great music here, like in Calgary, it's wild. So 100%. We chose those 2. It's an early show. It's 7 to 10. So we tried to pick a block of time where it's like, okay, it's not, if you want to go out after, like, it's not being like, hey, I'll meet up with everyone after the last band gets off the stage at 12:30. It's like, no. Last note hits right before 10 p.m. And so go out, do your thing. And it's a 80s spring formal theme. So kind of like one of those things where it come as you are, if you want to dress up, dress up. And if you don't, that in like the 1980s John Hughes movies, there's like the like kids in jean jackets and leather jackets at the back of prom. You know what I mean? It's like everybody looks cool. And it's like, I think that's like a nice thing. And it's just trying to do something different, like band releases album. I mean, pretty good narrative, but why don't we throw a party that's special, where it's like, this is happening once, and it's just the right theme for the album. And
I legitimately can't wait. And for people who are wondering, like, I am not like, you're the first musician. I mean, again, we are good friends, but that is not the reason you were here. I have seen you guys play several times. The last time at the Ship and Anchor was just absolute blast. And like, it is fun. Honestly, like, people dance, people, like, you guys are legitimately good, but if people are looking for something fun, kind of different to do next Friday, honestly, I just adore you guys as a band. I adore you as a friend. And come on out, the Beta Boys, Friday, June 2nd at Commonwealth, 7 to 10. Tickets are available now. Check out their Instagram. Buddy, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Danny.
This has been hilarious and awesome. And
pleasure to be here. Big fan of the show.
Yeah.
Big fan of the guy.
I don't know. I believe that you're heading out of town, so I'm not sure when I'm seeing you, but who knows?
We'll see.
We'll see.
Okay.
Buddy, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. It was great. That was Brett Sanford from the Beta Boys. Very fun to have him on and to talk a little music, do something a little different. We are at some point here going to have Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Press. Jeff Hamilton is there. Sick. Because I don't like vamping and just talking on my own. That is something that I have been very clear about. But Jeff Hamilton, I don't even know where to start. Thank you again, Brett. Brett's taking off. Brett is the president of the Football Reporters of Canada, but I don't think that's the right place to start. He is a dear friend. That's not the place to start. You cover the Bombers and the Jets. Honestly, we're mostly going to talk CFL, but before I do, how much of a relief is it? Because I know for me, like, the Flames had a pretty weird year, and I got back to Stamp, and I was just like, oh my God, this is nice. For you in Winnipeg, which was like arguably an even weirder year, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but some weird stuff. How nice is it just to be back doing CFL a little bit?
First off, great to see you, man. Thanks for having me on. Crazy, man, because it's like, you understand this. It's quite, I don't even know what the word is, man. Like, all encompassing, like, exhausting to cover two teams throughout the, in two leagues that don't take a break. Like, they even cross, even intersect together. So it's like, obviously there are times when the CFL is playing by itself and the NHL is playing by itself, but to your question, like, the Jets was bananas, right? I mean, it was easily, of the 6-7 seasons I've covered the team, was the craziest. The first half of the season was like, it was all about the bonus effect, that this team had turned itself around, and that great days were to come, and this team's a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. To flip the script in the second half, it was like this team was doing everything it possibly could, much like the Calgary Flames were, to not make the playoffs. They were easily one of the worst teams in the league, and then went through but I'd say the most exciting part, much like we've seen in Toronto, much like we saw in Calgary in their exit interviews, was the end, man. I mean, a season that started with so much promise and then absolutely derailed to the point where the Jets not made the playoffs, and they squeaked in. They clinched the second last game of the season, obviously with some help from teams around the league. They would have set the record for the team with the best, the greatest downfall in league history. So there was that just puts it into perspective. And then Rick Bowness going off at the end, and then of course the exit interviews, man, it was just wild.
The Rick Bowness part of it, like, because he covered the Stars. So last year, first round of the playoffs, like, I got to know, I didn't get to know him, but I got to cover him a little bit. And I was like, this is the nicest man I've ever seen. And to see him then going off was like, what is happening?
He's honestly, man, he was like, because we had Paul Maurice before, obviously, right? We see the run he's doing now in Florida, and that's pretty incredible turnaround for a guy who quit on the Winnipeg Jets and then now is leading the last year's President's Trophy winners to this year's dream story in the playoffs. I mean, Paul Maurice, anyone that knows Paul Maurice or has covered Paul Maurice knows how great of a quote he is. Rick Bowness, I'd argue, was even better because he was actually refreshingly honest. Like, he, that game 5 post game, which by the way, Daddy, was me and him for a minute and a half. It was the questions it was me and him. I was in Vegas. There was a whole room full of reporters, and just that, like when he said, it sounded like it was more time when he's like, any other questions, Kate, out of here. Like, it was quick as it could be, man. No one else could ask any other question, and no one needed to ask any other question because he said everything he needed to. But certainly, I mean, just to roundabout to even answer your previous question, was like, coming into football, man, it's just it's a breath of fresh air. It really is. You know, guys like you and I, we love covering the Canadian Football League. You know, the stories are plentiful. You know, especially during training camp, you have these, like, every single guy pretty much from the U.S. has a unique story, right? And I'm not saying there isn't, you know, good stories in the NHL or other leagues, but when you compare it to the NHL, man, it's like when you want to put in it, we all know a great stories involve, you know, a lot of adversity. And I'll tell you what, the adversity, while it exists in all sports, football seems to be a whole other story.
And there are, like, I'm again not saying that there aren't good stories in hockey, but like the difference is, like, honestly, we don't know who most of these guys are. Like the rookies, the rookie Americans showing up for training camp. Like, you have no idea. So you actually, as a reporter, it's super fun because you get to dig in and, like, learn about these guys. Whereas most hockey training camps, it's prospects who you've known about for 5 years. Like, there's not,
Totally.
it's are they going to break in? And then, like, people forget that most of these Americans who are coming up to the CFL, like, they never thought they were going to be in Winnipeg or Calgary. Like, they're like
anywhere in the country. And a lot of them need to get passports because they haven't been to Canada.
and like, so they're, what the hell are we doing here a little bit? And then one of my favorite things about the CFL is, as those guys, you know, they make the team, they go through a season, there comes a point where you can see that they've actually fallen in love with it. And, like, I imagine specifically in Winnipeg, where there's been so much success and we hear about that culture and guys kind of buying in and falling in love with the city and the organization. I imagine you get a fair bit of that. Eh?
Oh, for sure, man. I mean, and like, you know, I think most locker rooms, if not all locker rooms around the CFL, are pretty inviting when you compare them to the NFL. Like, the number one thing is, there's no doubt everyone wants to play, whether you're American or Canadian, doesn't matter where you're from, Europe, anywhere in the world, you want to play the best league in the world. The NFL is no doubt that, you know, that league. And so
CFL fans are asked, like, if it's only casual fans who don't recognize that, like, we're all rooting for these guys to go to the NFL. There's no resentment when a guy in the CFL gets his shot.
And there shouldn't be. I mean, I just, you know, I mean, I wouldn't want to hold anybody back in a promotion. I think that's the main argument. But, like, to answer, like, everyone talks about the politics in the NFL and how, like, it's just cutthroat, right? Because it's such a, you know, there's so much at stake in making a roster in the NFL, and then we all know the average careers. So it's just, you know, and a lot of it has to do with politics and where you were drafted and what position and all, you know, what size you are. And so to come to the CFL, a lot of guys, while they're certainly, like, figuring things out with all the new rules and the waggle and all, you know, everything that comes with the 3-down game, they like, as you mentioned, Danny, like, it's not very long afterwards where they're like, wow, I found a football home, right? Like, it feels like a home. It feels like family, for sure.
So let's get into it. I have been, like, straight up, like, I would love to come in and start chirping the Bombers. Just
I figured we would, you know, I didn't know what your entry would be into it, but
well, no, while I will express my, like, concerns at some point, like, I will be honest that, like, if I were picking the West, my number one team in the CFL, but also specifically the West Division, is the Bombers. Like, I just can't not. It was so crazy that they didn't win the Grey Cup. It was hilarious as someone who wasn't in Winnipeg that they didn't win the Grey Cup, but, like, it was crazy. Who's the second best team in the West for you?
Calgary, man. I mean, for a couple different reasons. I mean, I'd say the number one reason, I mean, if Nathan Rourke was still a BC Lion, I'd be saying the Lions right now, right? I mean, we know how close those two teams were in the standings last year. We know how close the West semi was. I mean, they're two very comparable teams, but Nathan Rourke just took, you know, the league by storm. Him being gone now and Vernon Adams Jr. being the, you know, his replacement, while a guy who has certainly a lot of experience in this league, does not have the level of consistency that Nathan Rourke brought week in and week out. So when I look at the West standings, and you look at the CFL as a whole, we know the most important position is quarterback, right? And so when you look at, you know, specifically the West and Zach Collaros, of course, of Winnipeg, and being the two-time reigning, you know, most outstanding player,
he's the best in the league,
and he's completely changed the entire culture. I wouldn't say the culture. The culture was good, but he's changed the entire narrative around the Bombers being the team who can't win or can't get the job done, right? And so when you look back down the West, I mean, I'm very curious. I have Calgary at 2. Couple reasons. You just can't count out Calgary. You know they're going to find good players. They have, you know, the Stampeders way, as you know, probably better than anybody. There is that, you know, a positive culture there. They're a young team that's now a bit older, right? So, like, that plays a massive role. And I know that, you know, certainly you've made the argument, others, and I've made the argument too, that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are an aging team. They have an aging core. Are they going to be able to do it again?
Yeah.
Well, and the question, I mean, I'll just put it this way. The Bombers wanted the 2024 Grey Cup for a reason. They got the 2025, but they wanted the 2024 specifically so they could fit that group. And I know there's a lot of guys on the Bombers who are talking about 2025 and wanting to, be around for that game. And because you're looking at guys in their, early to mid 30s, Stanley Bryant, geez, guy's 37 years old, and he's still.
He is arguably, and it's funny because, like, again, I made fun of Stanley Bryant a little bit last year.
You love that clip. Yeah.
I love that clip, but he remains an elite offensive lineman in the league, but he is at that age where, and this is something in every sport, this is not a knock on him, but when it goes fast. And when you're dealing with a guy in his late 30s, particularly a guy whose like job involves so much physical labor, you can't help but worry about when it's going to happen.
Not to mention his number one responsibility is to cover the blind side of Zach Collaros. So it's like he can't take a play off. Like he can't have many plays, and he didn't have many plays, to be fair, than the one where quote unquote was put on rollerblades and defeated, which is a great high. Was it Sean Lemon?
No, that was Fuller and Aramolade.
Okay, yeah. So just quality rusher too. Obviously, like that's a great clip to put on your highlight reel.
For context here, when the Stamps played the Bombers, there was a beautiful sack where Aramolade basically bull rushed him, and like me at the end of a football season, like I lose my mind. Like I'm a crazy person for the last 6 weeks. Then about 2 weeks after the season ends, and I do this thing where it's like, because there are more people in Winnipeg specifically, like media people, I'm like, I got to stand up to the media in Winnipeg, like this, as if you guys are some like powerful group.
Yeah.
I was just like sharing that clip being like, and it's ridiculous. It's so embarrassing. But
well, it's been a great run to cover, man. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you had it in Calgary before the Bombers became the class of the CFL. I mean, it's great because you can, I always thought, okay, you want to cover a losing team or a winning team. You don't want to cover a team that hovers around 500 because you just don't know where you're going with the narrative, right? Everything changes every week. But, to see the Bombers and have the kind of success they have, you're able to talk more critically about them too. Not that you wouldn't do it while they were losing. You did it way more while they were losing. It was just on harder feelings, right? And now it's like, okay, you're playing well. Well, what's the deal with this? Or where did this go wrong? Whereas when the team isn't doing well, the idea of zeroing in on something that isn't going well is like night and day when the team's doing
well. Last year, I mean, I've said this, like Kamar Jordan had a tough season last year, had some big drops specifically against the Bombers that arguably cost the Stamps those games. And it's so uncomfortable to just be like, put it on one guy when the team, but like, player had a couple drops when the team has won the last 5. Way easier to do that, right? So
yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, again, like the other thing with the Bombers, and I mean, again, I honestly and because I'm not traveling, who knows if I'd get to cover it, but like, I don't feel like we have gotten the like big Calgary Winnipeg playoff game that like we all deserve. Like we know that like the head coaches don't seem to be like particularly fond of one another. Like it was the Stamps were the best team of one era, immediately followed by the Bombers.
Right.
Like I do, and that may be that I'm a Calgary reporter and you're a Winnipeg reporter, and I'm sure everyone in Saskatchewan is like, you guys are idiots. Like that's not, but it's the game that I want in the playoffs at some point.
Well, we got it a little bit in 2019, but I think you'd make the argument that that's kind of when Calgary started turning away from their dominance, right? I mean, and even in that game,
that game was the end.
That game had to be the end because how many times I can certainly count them. It's like it's too many, but there certainly was several in a row where going to McMahon Stadium was, you knew it was going to happen. The Bombers might put up a fight. They might, be close by halftime, but by the final whistle, they certainly weren't on the winning side. And to see them dominate the way they did in 2019, and they Zach Collaros, right? Like, I mean, that was his start. So, I mean, you don't have Zach Collaros. I don't think you're winning that one either, but that was certainly, I think, the start of, again, like, I mean, what did Calgary finish with last year? 12-6?
Yeah, I think so.
So it's not like they're a bad outfit or they aren't, like they somehow dropped off a cliff. They just
all 3 losses to Winnipeg were by a touchdown or less, right?
Exactly. I want to ask you this, Danny, though, because my big thing in this, and I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago in my CFL rundown column, the stability at quarterback in the league this year might just be certainly the worst since I've covered. But it might be for a while, and while there are a few, and I like a few fresh faces for sure. But if you look at the West and you look at the East too, outside of Zach Collaros, does anyone feel really good about their quarterback? Now, I know that the argument is Jake Maier, right? Like,
I don't know. I think Jake has a lot to prove.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Like, obviously we've seen flashes of brilliance from him, right? We've seen him certainly show that he can be a starter and a good number one quarterback in this league. But when you end the season not being the guy behind center, and so that's what I'm curious.
Bo came in and Bo was better.
So like, I'm wondering what you think you're going to see from him this year, and how you think Bo Levi Mitchell, while I'm sure they were close buddies or friends or whatever, good teammates, how you think Bo Levi Mitchell not being in Calgary is going to help him.
Well, first of all, it's him a full training camp as the starting quarterback. Now, Bo, if we're being like nitpicky, like Bo didn't take a ton of reps ever in training camps, like sort of past 2017. Like they were always careful with his shoulder, and just generally like with the backups. But I think that helps. I will say quickly, like I think Jake is better than he was in that playoff game. Like that game was really weird against the Lions. Dickinson made 2 really weird calls on like 3rd and short.
Okay, right.
That just didn't work out. But Jake was bad in the second half. There's no question. I also just honestly think that like the Lions big brother them a little bit, which is odd to say, but they just couldn't figure it out defensively, and offensively they screwed up. Now I think Jake coming down the stretch was largely, like I'd say he was a top 4 or 5 quarterback. If the Stamps really want to push Winnipeg this year, they need him to be a top 3 quarterback in the CFL. And he's got to prove that. But they've now gotten a longer look at him. I mean, I'm making the argument, right? Like, I don't necessarily know that I believe all of this, but like they've gotten a better look at him. They can build the system around his strengths a little bit without sort of changing the playbook from Bo, who is more of a gunslinger, to Jake, who is a little bit more of a game manager. But look, it's my biggest question. It's by far my biggest question for this team. Like you said, it, quarterback's the most important job. I look around the West, and like the reason, part of it, why I have the Stamps at number 2 in the West, and possibly in the league, but probably in the West for now, is like I don't trust the Lions, as you said. Edmonton, they might have a young quarterback in there. I think they're going to be better, but like neither Cornelius nor Trey Ford like really has the reps and hasn't shown me anything. Saskatchewan just didn't improve their offensive line. Like,
well, they added a couple of guys, but there's a lot of moving pieces there. You know what I mean? Including Trevor Harris. Like Trevor Harris is a good quarterback. He's not a great CFL quarterback, and I think bringing in his consistent. You needed to know as the Saskatchewan Roughriders this year under a new offensive coordinator. Under a coaching staff that pretty much has half a season to figure it out. Like if they're not in a playoff picture by Labor Day, they might not be on the sidelines by Labor Day. And so you needed to know what you were getting. So I applauded, signing, Trevor Harris, and it took a breakup in Montreal and an ownership fiasco for him to actually even arrive there. But it's just too many moving pieces, and it's consistent as as much as you know what you're going to get with Trevor Harris. Like I'm not buying that he's the savior of a team that lost a lot of players, added some good pieces too, but needed a complete overhaul from culture to all areas of the team. And that's a lot to ask as far as a turnover in one game or 1 year. Sorry.
Yeah. I feel like Trevor Harris has been the 5th best quarterback in the league, regardless of who else is in the league, for 6 years now, basically. He's not going to be the problem. I just don't think he's going to elevate you to the point where you're like a genuine Grey Cup contender. And like you go east, like, do any of us have any idea what's going on in Ottawa? Like, obviously Mazzoli will be the starter, but like, I have no sense of how good or bad that team is going to be. I don't think that.
Well, how wild is the East when you come into quarterbacks? I mean, Toronto is going with Chad Kelly. Like, I'm sorry, man, but that is like, I get it. You might. I was gonna say sell tickets. I don't even think that's true. Like he's a good name. Like he's a good, maybe Barstool will do more. Maybe Barstool Sports will do more stories about the Toronto Argonauts this season. But like outside of that, I mean, this is an unproven guy who had a couple good plays in the Grey Cup, helped his team win, no doubt about that. A lot of respect for that, but only has a handful of live snaps in the regular season.
100%. It's why I can't put them, like, I would like to, out of respect, be like, you won the Grey Cup, you are number 2 in my like power rankings, and it's like I can't. Like
I can't. No, man. No. Like I don't even. I actually have Hamilton ahead of Toronto, and Hamilton I thought had arguably the best offseason as far as loading up on players and whatnot. But I'm still the caveat in all of it is, man, I thought Bo Levi Mitchell was going to be in a TSN studio this season, not signing a 3-year deal and shifting the narrative to like being the hottest free agent. Nothing against Bo. Like, guy's had a tremendous season, and I hope he performs in a way that makes me sound like a complete idiot right now. But when you look at the last few years, particularly his penchant for injuries, he gets injured, man. And what is Hamilton?
Yeah. Now I respect them rolling the dice a little bit because I don't think the Dane Evans thing was working out.
No.
And I think that they needed to change there. But I mean, I'm fully with you. Like, Bo did get sat mid-season last year. Like, he was replaced by Jake Mayer, like a guy who had 3 CFL starts to his name. Now, Bo also came in at the end of the West semifinal and just was hucking the ball and looked amazing. But like, he's not the first player to come in garbage time and look great. I think all of us, like, he's a Calgary guy. He's a legend here. He's going to have his number retired. If he ever wants a coaching job, and somehow a coaching job can pay as much as a TSN panelist job, I'm sure he will take it here. You're 100% right. Like, the idea that Bo, it's been, I don't know that I always would say he wasn't as hurt as people realize, but I never said his numbers dropped. His performances declined. You can check my email. I have a million emails from Stampeders fans yelling about how Bo Levi Mitchell shouldn't be the starting quarterback anymore.
Right.
So the idea that he automatically makes Hamilton a contender, my thing is that, like, the Calgary guy who I do think was a great signing is Jameer Thurman. And suddenly, like, they're defensively going to be absolutely nasty. And when you're competing with the Toronto team that, again, Chad Kelly is the quarterback, a Montreal team that Cody Fajardo is the quarterback. He's only in his 4th year as a starter.
Wild.
Do you remember what he said? I'm only in my 2nd year as a starter.
Yeah, that was his trademark comment. You know, it's just my 2nd year as a starter. So it's like, but wasn't his 1st year as a starter? Didn't he end up winning being nominated for the West MOP, or was that?
I think so.
I mean, but that goes to show that year, man, where he got nominated for the West MOP, lost to Brandon Banks on Hamilton that season. Everyone got injured. All quarterbacks got injured. Like, there was no one that was healthy. Like, it was one of those. It was the weird year where like 7 starters were down for like 4+ games or whatever in the year.
Well, that was the year that Arbuckle would have replaced Bo for an extended period. That was the year that
Nichols got hurt.
Yeah, Zach eventually got traded to Winnipeg, but was not, like, we thought he was out of the league.
Didn't even play until the final regular season game against Calgary.
Exactly. God love the CFL. Yeah, that would have been that year. It's fascinating. No, I think you're 100% right, and I also think that we aren't supposed to. We're not supposed to. It hasn't talked about, but like John Huffnagel, I went to this fan forum before the season started, and he openly said that, like, the XFL was affecting who they could get up here. And, like, I do think the developing your quarterback is going to be something over the next 5 to 6 years that CFL fans need to pay attention to, because there's not just going to be these sort of like 2nd-tier non-NFL guys who come up here because they have an option in the States where you're putting 4-down, smaller field tape out there for the NFL teams to see. Well,
and, like, you know, kind of just to piggyback off my comment earlier, like, a lot of these guys don't even have passports, so they want to stay in the States, right? They want to stay in the league. Like it's a tough, even with evidence, and there's plenty of it, right? I mean, guys going from the CFL and getting NFL opportunities or going on and having great NFL careers. It certainly is not unique to the CFL. In the CFL. But if you look at some of the announcements, like whether it's the USFL, the XFL, and when they start, and they have already started sending guys to the NFL, that is going to be, I think, the harder sell, is to come up to a different country in a game where you need to learn different rules, particularly if you're on offense and as a receiver. You know, obviously the waggle and all those things. A lot of guys just can't seem to grasp it. A lot of guys can. Dalton Schoen probably might be arguably one of the best ever to grasp the waggle and then lead the league in receiving yards and touchdowns. But it is a big ask, and so all those things. I mean, it's hard to quantify, right? Because there's so much American talent. It's just the fact of the matter. There absolutely is so many players out there, and if you look at some of the, you know, if you look at a lot of the players that, particularly in quarterback, if you look at a lot of the teams around the CFL and where guys came from, like, they're not all coming from Alabama or LSU, right? Like they're
Yeah.
majority are, right? And so as much as I certainly agree that these, any added football league, particularly in the US, of course, is going to water down the talent for Canada. But for me personally, I mean, I just don't see it as big of an emergency or anywhere near hitting the panic button. I do think the coaches and the GMs around the CFL have a way better idea of those conversations with players and trying to get guys down. And I'm sure they're met with those obstacles of other leagues. I think, at the end of the day, there's only so many jobs out there and significantly more supply than demand.
Yeah, it's only really, to be honest, quarterback a little bit, but you're all right that like how many guys come from the Mountain West Conference, like
totally,
it's
absolutely.
A little bit offensive line. Like I don't think there are enough good offensive linemen for the NFL, let alone
good point.
Three leagues below it. But at the same time, it's why guys like Stanley Bryan and Derek Dennis are playing into their mid to late 30s, because there are jobs available for them. Who are the Bombers' American receivers? I do want to like just ask this because like they were so good last year and added the second highest.
So Dalton Schoen is he led the league last year in receiving yards and touchdowns. Kenny Lawler is now on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers after a year away in Edmonton, and of course he led the league in receiving with the Bombers in 2021. You have Rashid Bailey as the third American, and he came back at a massive haircut after they signed Kenny Lawler. There was just no money left for him. He signed for something like 80 or 90K. Took about a $40,000 pay cut, and probably from his previous year, and probably more because he got opportunities. He got offers from other teams. He wanted to come back. Well, he's in competition, I'd argue, with Carlton Agudosi. And Carlton Agudosi, as you know, and as Calgary fans know, probably only Winnipeg fans and Calgary fans know, because the only game he played last season was I don't know if it was home or away. I think it was home. It was home. It was in Winnipeg. It's 26-19 wins, 6 catches, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. Talk about a debut.
Literally, like Trey Roberson had him covered perfectly, and it didn't matter. He would just like reach up. He was so tall, and I just remember specifically talking to you probably just on the phone like a month later, and you being like, you realize he only played one game, right? Like that was just
he got hurt the next week in Edmonton, suffered an ankle injury early into the game, and never played the rest of the season. So he's a guy that the Bombers are certainly high on. He looks bigger, stronger this year. He's the other American that'll be fighting for a job. And then, of course, the Canadians, Nick Dembski, who had a career best 10 touchdowns last year. He still can't quite get to that 1,000-yard receiving. I think he had a career high 722 yards last year. And then Drew Wolodarski, who, for his money, I mean, he's a guy that comes in and does all the thankless jobs, right? He's the guy that creates a lot of space for players. He's usually one of the guys that's upfield making the big blocks. He's the decoy, if you will, and then still manages to reel in a handful of passes. So as far as receivers go, the Bombers, I think you can make an argument in other markets. Certainly, I think of Edmonton for sure. Other teams, Hamilton's got a good, Calgary's decent. But they're certainly up there, if not one of the best groups for sure.
Gonna wrap up here, but I'm gonna ask you: are you this great league that we both cover and love? Are you the final traveling print CFL reporter?
That appears to be the situation this year. So,
I don't know how much I should be talking about it. But.
My colleague Taylor Allen will also be doing a couple games. So yeah, the Winnipeg Free Press is the lone traveling media, which is it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's nice to obviously be on scene and continue to cover games on the road. But man, it sucks to not have not to have colleagues like yourself come in, every week for home games in Winnipeg. And, my colleague at the Winnipeg Sun, Ted Wyman, I mean, we have a blast every weekend, covering the team together. So it'll be disappointing, but I'm still holding out hope, man, that, wake up one morning and everything's back to normal.
Me too. Either way, man, I'm happy you're on the road at least. And I have no idea when the Bombers come, but we'll grab drinks when you do.
Twice in Calgary.
Really sick. Okay.
Yeah.
Summer or fall?
One in summer, one in fall. I forget the exact dates, but it's like week 7 or 8 or 9. I think. So it's before Labor Day.
That's good too, because honestly, the Bombers do draw here in Calgary. So if they both go off to a start, that should be a fun game to be up. It'll be good to have you here. And I'm bummed. Honestly, those Winnipeg trips are among my favorites. We go to Ted's backyard, hung out at your place. Melissa,
I just think, Daddy, you never. There wasn't a CFL city you didn't love, man. You know, and you know, I'm like I said, I'm gonna be hoping. I'm holding out hope that you'll be back on your grind.
Appreciate that, buddy, and I appreciate you joining us, man. Thank you so much. This was awesome, and I don't know. Hopefully fans enjoy some like specific CFL talk, because it's been fun for me. Yeah.
There you go.
I'm allowed to swear. I think it matters. But
hey, man, honestly, really appreciate you having me on, and any opportunity to talk about the CFL, I'll jump all over it. So yeah, man, good to see you. Great to talk the 3-down game, and let's see what happens, man. We can all make predictions as much as we want, but you got to play the games, and that's what makes this league so special and fun to cover.
100%. None of us saw Nathan Rourke coming. So, cheers, buddy. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Okay, I don't know how we cut you off video-wise here, but there you go. All right, guys, I think that's it. So we are here. I think I should probably do an ad read that I've forgotten to do the entire show, which is just, I'm learning here, guys. I'm trying to be better. This is great podcasting. Here we go. Live in the Noodle studio. Local, love, delicious. Since opening their first store back in 2005, Noodle has been all flavor and just the right amount of weird. 2 locations, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, and an Airdrie at 105 Main Street North. That is it for me. I am Danny Austin. Thank you for listening to the Just a Game podcast with Rob Kerr. Appreciate it, guys. Have a great weekend.